I am a urologist specializing in male longevity and reconstructive vascular health. There is a highly specific, psychologically devastating moment that millions of men over 50 experience in the bedroom. Yet it is almost never discussed openly in clinical literature or standard consultations. I am talking about the sudden, inexplicable loss of rigidity right in the middle of intimacy. The exact moment it starts to deflate. You are fully engaged, the desire is completely there, but structurally, the blood simply evacuates the tissue. I see men in my clinic every single week who describe this exact mid-act deflation, convinced that their sex life is effectively over, or that their only remaining option is to become entirely dependent on synthetic, high-dose pills just to maintain intimacy. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact biochemical error happening in your pelvic floor during that moment, and I will show you a clinical technique to reverse that chemical cascade instantly. Why does it deflate when you are still mentally aroused? An erection is a highly volatile balancing act between two competing branches of your autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic branch, which controls your state of rest, digestion, and relaxation, is what triggers the initial release of nitric oxide. This nitric oxide dilates the microscopic arteries, filling the spongy cylinders called the corpora cavernosa with blood. As they fill, they expand and physically crush the exit veins against the tough outer membrane of the penis, mechanically trapping the blood inside. However, the moment your brain perceives any physical strain, a sudden shift in breathing, or even a microsecond of performance anxiety, your sympathetic nervous system, the ancient fight-or-flight center, violently activates. When the sympathetic nervous system fires, it releases a flood of stress hormones, primarily adrenaline and noradrenaline. These hormones are the most potent vasoconstrictors in the human body. They act like a chemical tourniquet. They instantly clamp down on the pineal arteries and force the smooth muscle to contract. When that muscle contracts, the pressure drops, the exit veins open back up, and the blood rapidly drains out of the spongy tissue. Regardless of how mentally aroused you are, the tissue deflates because your nervous system literally thinks you need that blood in your legs to run from a physical threat, not in your pelvis to reproduce. Research from leading urological institutes emphasizes that in men over 50, the sympathetic nervous system becomes hyperreactive. The threshold for triggering this adrenaline dump is significantly lowered due to age-related oxidative stress, chronic systemic inflammation, and minor cardiovascular decline. The biggest mistake men make when they feel the erection softening is to panic, speed up, and try to force physical stimulation to get it back. This is the absolute worst thing you can do. Forcing the act only spikes your heart rate and adrenaline further, guaranteeing the complete and total loss of the erection. To save the erection and stop the deflation in its tracks, you have to manually override the sympathetic nervous system and flood the tissue with a fresh wave of nitric oxide. You do this through a specific 2-minute respiratory and muscular protocol the very moment you feel the softening begin. First, you must completely stop physical movement. Tell your partner you need a brief pause. Continuing to push through the deflation only amplifies the neurological stress response. Next, you must execute a deep diaphragmatic breathing pattern known as box breathing, but specifically adapted for pelvic vasodilation. Inhale deeply through your nose for 4 seconds, expanding your lower abdomen and pushing your belly out, keeping your chest completely still. Hold that breath in your abdomen for 4 seconds. This specific breath hold is critical. It creates a mild, temporary buildup of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, a state called hypercapnia. Exhale incredibly slowly through your mouth for 6 seconds, while simultaneously and consciously relaxing your pelvic floor. These are the exact muscles you would use to stop the flow of urine. By creating that mild hypercapnia and then slowly releasing it while relaxing the pelvic floor, you trigger a biological mechanism known as reactive hyperemia. Your brain detects the change in blood gases, and immediately commands a massive, localized surge of endothelial nitric oxide to the pelvic region to dilate the vessels and restore oxygenation. Do this cycle for 2 uninterrupted minutes. The adrenaline clears your bloodstream, the nitric oxide floods the endothelial lining, and the smooth muscle in the corpora cavernosa relaxes once again, trapping the blood and restoring rigidity. If you believe this level of true physiological understanding should be the standard of care for men's health, rather than doctors simply handing out prescriptions and rushing you out the door, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It allows me to keep bringing this vital clinical truth to the men who need it most. For a long time in my practice, I firmly believed that if a man mastered this autonomic nervous system override, he wouldn't need any other intervention. I was highly skeptical of the entire supplement industry, viewing it as mostly marketing hype with zero clinical weight behind it. My protocol was strictly behavioral and dietary. However, I noticed a distinct and frustrating pattern in my patients over 60. They could successfully execute the breathing protocol, but their cellular machinery simply couldn't produce enough of the actual signaling molecules to sustain the relaxed state. Their biological threshold had moved too far due to decades of subtle cellular aging. This forced me to dive deep into the clinical literature to research natural compounds that directly manipulate the enzymes responsible for vascular dilation. I found a highly specific formulation that I now integrate into my clinical protocol for these exact cases. It utilizes a compound called forskolin, which directly activates an enzyme called adenylate cyclase inside the Leydig cells. This triggers a powerful parallel pathway to nitric oxide that forces the smooth muscle in the erectile tissue to relax and accept blood flow, independently of the traditional pathways. I combine this with a precise extract of Andean maca, which works directly on the central hormonal axis to calm the hyperreactive brain signals that cause the adrenaline dump in the first place, and black pepper extract, or piperine, to increase the bioavailability of all these compounds by up to 20%, ensuring they are not destroyed by liver enzymes before reaching the bloodstream. I have observed patients in their late 60s and early 70s who had essentially given up on spontaneous intimacy due to constant deflation, regaining reliable, sustained rigidity within 4 to 5 weeks of daily integration. It is a clean, clinically targeted nutritional support, completely free of synthetic chemicals or hidden pharmaceutical analogs. I have placed the link to the exact formulation I recommend in the pinned comment of this video, so you can evaluate the mechanism and the laboratory purity yourself. When you finally understand that deflating during intimacy is a neurological and vascular mismatch, rather than a permanent loss of your manhood, it changes everything about how you approach aging. Leaving this hyper-reactive, sympathetic state untreated doesn't just ruin your confidence in the bedroom. Over time, that chronic vascular constriction and constant bombardment of stress hormones permanently damage the delicate endothelial lining of all your blood vessels. The men who learn to control their autonomic nervous system and provide their blood vessels with the correct biochemical raw materials don't just restore their sexual performance. They fundamentally protect their entire cardiovascular system. They experience lower resting blood pressure, significantly better stress tolerance, and a profound return of deep, restorative sleep. In the clinic, the difference is visually undeniable. Men who proactively address this vascular sensitivity age with vigor, sharpness, and confidence, while those who ignore it retreat into anxiety, isolation, and accelerated physical decline. To summarize, when you feel an erection starting to deflate, do not force it. Stop immediately. Execute the 2-minute diaphragmatic breath hold protocol to clear the adrenaline from your system and trigger reactive hyperemia to flood the penile tissue with fresh nitric oxide. I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced this sudden loss of rigidity? And did you realize it was your fight or flight system taking over? The biological window to train and heal your vascular tissue is open right now, but your endothelial cells lose their incredible plasticity if they are constantly subjected to oxidative damage and stress hormones year after year. The nutritional support I mentioned earlier is designed to be the biological catalyst that primes your cells when behavioral techniques need a biochemical backing to cross the finish line. The link is in the pinned comment for you to review at your own pace. Remember, treating the root cause of your vascular aging buys you decades of real, spontaneous vitality, while merely treating the symptom buys you only a borrowed hour.